Well, the GameStop Robinhood developments just will not stop. So now it starts with the regulators and the government who have woken up to this situation. Maxine Waters, she's the powerful chairman of the Financial Committee. Let's put this up there on the screen. Is wanting to call Keith Gill, a.k.a., I won't read his full screen name, which I do think is hilarious, the Reddit user who uncovered much of the short on the GameStop stock and in many ways started this entire frenzy, wants him to come and testify before the House Financial Services Committee. And look, Krystal, maybe that is valid, maybe. But I'm beginning to see it all in a totality of where the regulators and the government seem to be blaming these Redditors much more and not looking at any of the things on Wall Street which required this entire situation to develop in the first place. Why are they not calling all the hedge fund people who shorted the stock at 140% value or who do that on a routine basis? And you see it everywhere. Janet Yellen, the United States Treasury Secretary, is convening a meeting on GameStop with the SEC, the CFTC, and all the other regulatory agencies that are under her purview, saying that they believe the integrity of the markets is important. I also agree the integrity of the markets is important. But what if the markets didn't have integrity before this whole thing? And now this just reveals how much of a sham so much of the trading activity actually is. Not the whole stock market. I'm not, I want to be very clear here about what happens, but there is very shady trading on Wall Street that happens all the time. And I just think it's so telling that this is what grinds their gears and prompts a full-scale government investigation, both House and in the executive branch, when so much of the routine behavior on Wall Street is just given a pass.
She says she also wants to call the Robinhood people and is coming up with her wish list of people who she wants to testify. So I'm going to withhold judgment and see how it goes. I will say, this really sticks in my craw. Maxine Waters kept Katie Porter off of this committee. And Katie Porter was so effective at understanding corporate greed and holding CEOs to account and was so fearless and actually has a professional background that allows her to understand
she was like a comptroller or something.
Complex issues. And so she's a lawyer in this field. And so it really annoys me that she requested to be on this committee and could be in place to make these hearings much, much, much more beneficial and effective. And her request to be on this committee was denied, and almost everybody else was allowed to come on, and they shrunk the committee. So it's not like there wasn't room here for her. So that really bothers me. And then you're right. Like, look, again, I'm going to withhold judgment and see what the line of questioning is, see how all of this goes. But I'm extraordinarily nervous about a couple of things. First of all, I've always been worried that they're going to use like the woke defense of the hedge funds and pull out, look at this naughty language, look at this offensive thing, look at this trolling behavior.
They banned the Discord server over hateful content. Welcome to the internet. Okay?
Exactly. And we don't condone any of that. We're not like saying that it's fine and good, whatever. But this is like not the issue at hand. And oftentimes those sorts of arguments are used to protect the civil, dignified people in the suits who rig the market and manipulate it, but are allowed to do it, and it's not a problem, doesn't trigger these kinds of investigations. So that's one thing that I'll be watching for here. And then the other piece of this is there's been like this kind of weird both sidesing of this whole dynamic. It's like, no, actually, these big players were outrageously greedy.
Yes.
And then once they got one-upped with this collective movement, then they collaborated and colluded to make sure that they didn't get screwed even more than they already did. Like active collusion to protect all of the big players involved. That's the issue. People on Reddit deciding they like a stock is not something to be investigated or cracked down on. And that's the part, even Elizabeth Warren and her statements were weirdly both sidesing this whole thing. That's the part that I really start to get uncomfortable with.
100%. And now the SEC is getting involved. Let's put this up there. They've launched an investigation. They're hunting for fraud in the post they're hyping GameStop. Now, look, we've talked about this before. There are, Fidelity and BlackRock and others were heavily invested in GameStop. I think one hedge fund made $700 million off of the place. So I'm not saying that there weren't a lot of big money on the other side of the trade. But what I am saying is, again, I think it tells us everything about what prompts an investigation, what prompts actually deep examination, what, triggers a government-wide just basic area of concern and what doesn't. And I think that what doesn't, to me, is the problem, which is like Robinhood's whole business model, which is payment for order flow and high frequency traders who take all of that information and drive up prices. It's basically a leeching tax off of the market, or many of the hedge funds and the behavior that they exhibit on a day-to-day basis. But because they're highly capitalized, their stuff is not investigated at all. And so it just seems a complete issue it's a fairness issue, which is that, if there were people who were manipulating the markets on Reddit, I'm not saying the average Redditors themselves, there were people who were pumping out false information and trying to ride the hype and all of that, then, I think that's bad. But remember that Jim Cramer clip that I played here on the show from 2006? He's talking about doing the exact same thing. He's like, of course you do it anyway, because the SEC doesn't know which way is up. And you call him you call some bozo reporter at the Wall Street Journal and you get him to write a story. And I'm like, is it all that different? Jim Cramer's a rich man. He's walking around on Wall Street. A lot of these hedge fund guys they've done much of the same thing. They completely got away with it. So in an issue of fairness, I want to see that structural issue solved long before we start going after any small time Redditors.
Very well said and very revealing indeed. So we'll be keeping our eye on that one for sure. And we'll have more Rising for you after this.